Hi everyone. Tonight we're going to slip into a place you probably won't survive if you're squeamish about creaks, whispers, and things that stand too still in the dark. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I always picture this strange little club stretched across time zones, blinking screens like fireflies. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. When I was 9, my room looked ordinary to any visitor. Twin bed, scuffed dresser, toy chest under the window. But it felt like the center of a stage where something unseen rehearsed every night. The glow-in-the-dark stars I stuck to the ceiling had started to peel at the corners, curling like tiny claws. As I lay there, I'd count them in a whisper, not because I needed the numbers, but because the sound of my own voice made the silence less heavy. Some nights it worked. On the first night you're about to hear about, it didn't. I was staring at those stars when the branches outside began sketching shapes across my wall. At first it was like slow finger painting in gray and black. Then one shadow refused to move. It crouched near the toy chest, dense as wet ink. My brain tried to file it under pile of clothes or sleepy eyes trick. But each time I blinked, it stayed fixed, like an icon frozen on a screen. I almost joked to myself, well, that's just the boogeyman, no big deal. Because sarcasm is what I used instead of bravery. But my laugh came out thin, like the squeak of a balloon. When I blinked again, the shadow was gone. That should have been a relief. It wasn't. A chill started inside me rather than on my skin, like the feeling you get when a teacher calls your name in a class you forgot to attend. I yanked the blanket over my head. One quirky fact about old houses. This one had been built in 1912 and still had iron nails in the floorboards. Looped through my mind like a mantra. An academic article I'd read once said, children reinterpret ambiguous stimuli as threats when under stress. At 9, I didn't use the word stimuli, but my body sure knew the effect. I drifted off the way a laptop goes into sleep mode mid-task, abruptly, with nothing resolved. Morning sunlight came through the window like a stage light revealing the set. The toy chest's lid was open. I never left it open. Mom hated when toys spilled out and would scold us with the efficiency of a drill sergeant. I shut it quickly, like closing a tab you shouldn't have opened, and said nothing. Weeks slipped by in a rhythm of school, bike rides, and bedtime rituals. Then my 5-year-old sister delivered a casual bomb at breakfast. Between bites of cereal, she said she didn't like the man in the closet. Her tone was the same one she used for, "I don't like peas." Mom brushed it off, stirring her coffee with the spoon she used for every cup. Another one of those old age habits people develop without thinking. But I caught my sister's eyes. She wasn't pretending. She said the man whispered at night, but she couldn't understand the words. That evening, Mom did the full tuck-in routine and added a quick prayer over my sister's bed. She didn't open the closet door, though. Maybe she didn't want to see it empty. Maybe she didn't want to see it full. Later, half asleep, I heard a new sound. Fingernails dragging slowly across wood. Not like a cat, not like furniture, but like someone writing a sentence you can't read. The scrape came closer until it stopped beside my bed. My muscles locked. I gripped the blanket as if it were a parachute cord. Another random fact bobbed up. Octopuses have 3 hearts, and I clung to it because thinking about cephalopods was easier than turning my head. Sleep took me like a sedative. In the morning, fresh scratches gouged the floorboards. They looked deliberate, parallel, like someone practicing calligraphy. When I showed Mom, she got angry in that adult way that's more about fear than discipline. She insisted I'd been playing with something sharp or dragging furniture. I swore I hadn't. She swore back under her breath. After that, the nights became a slow academic debate between my senses and my sanity. Faint whispers rose from my closet like a radio tuned between stations. Sometimes my sister would wake crying, pointing at the corner of her room, saying, "He's there, he's there." I never saw him, but every hair on my arms stood up as if someone had brushed them the wrong way. One winter night, I woke to find my bedroom door open. I always closed it. The hallway light spilled a stripe across the floor like a yellow blade. As I watched, the light went out. Footsteps came down the hall and stopped outside my room. The door creaked. A tall, dark shape leaned in, only its head poking through the opening. I shut my eyes and went full possum. When I opened them, the door was closed again. Morning again? Mom denied coming in. My sister said she had seen the man by her bed that same night. Only then did Mom look worried. She lit a candle and prayed in every room, old country style, quoting a proverb about smoke driving away spirits. For a while, the house felt calmer, but it didn't last. Even years later, the memory of that house knots my stomach like a charging cable stuffed in a drawer. What we saw and heard wasn't just imagination. It was real, or at least real enough to leave marks in wood and memory. After Mom's candle tour, the air in the house smelled like wax and old prayers for about a week. She told us everything was fine, but at night the walls still ticked and popped as if counting down. I'd lie in bed trying to invent explanations, because a kid's brain will do anything to keep the world rational. Old houses creak, pipes shift, shadows stretch. Academic research calls this pattern completion. You fill in blanks so reality feels consistent. But what do you do when the blanks fill themselves? I started sleeping with a flashlight under my pillow. It was one of those cheap plastic ones with a cracked lens. Clicking it on made a small popping sound like a soda can opening. The beam cut across my room but never reached the closet completely, as if the dark there was thicker. I'd mutter trivia to myself. Sea turtles can hold their breath for hours. It was my own weird lullaby, a fact that felt big enough to push out the whispers. The man in the closet became a household character, at least for my sister. She'd draw him with crayons, stick figure, big hat, no face. Mom would roll her eyes and say, "No scary drawings before bed." But she kept them anyway, pinned on the fridge. One day at school, a teacher asked us to write a scary story. I wrote about the man, but gave him an owl's head because somehow that felt safer. The teacher gave me a gold star and wrote, "Very creative," in the margin. Creativity didn't stop the sound of nails on the floorboards. That sound came back a few nights later, stronger, like someone dragging a fork across a plate. It started near the closet, crawled along the baseboard, and stopped beside my bed. The flashlight wouldn't turn on. My thumb slipped on the switch. I held my breath. I thought about a random fact from science class. Humans replace every skin cell roughly once a month, and wondered whose skin cells were floating in this dark. Then nothing. Silence so loud it felt like pressure. I must have blacked out from fear because the next thing I knew, it was morning. New scratches on the floor again. Longer, deeper. Mom's reaction shifted from denial to threat. "If you're doing this, you'll pay for the refinishing." Her voice was tight like a guitar string about to snap. She made me show my fingernails to prove I hadn't been clawing at the wood. My sister just watched, spoon frozen halfway to her mouth, cereal going soggy. Nights blurred into a routine of whisper, scrape, denial. I started noticing smaller details. The air near the closet always felt cooler, like someone had left a refrigerator door open. Sometimes my toy chest lid would be open in the morning, toys rearranged in subtle ways. My red fire truck facing the wall, my stuffed bear turned on its side. Academic debate phrases floated into my head from school. The preponderance of evidence suggests, but evidence meant nothing when your only witness was 5 years old. One quirky thing about my mom: she'd keep an old transistor radio by her bed tuned to an AM station that only played classical music. She said the static soothed her. Sometimes at night, I'd hear faint strains of violins through the wall. And for a second, I'd imagine the whispers had turned melodic. But then the real whispers would return from my closet, like someone testing a microphone, breathy and low. I never understood the words. Maybe I was lucky. My sister developed a habit of sleeping with her head at the foot of the bed so she could face the door. "If he comes out of the closet, I can run," she explained once, like it was normal. I tried it too. It didn't help. You can't outrun something that slides out of dark corners. One night, in a burst of bravery, I opened the closet myself before bed. I switched on the ceiling light and pulled the door wide. Just clothes, boxes, the smell of dust. I even stuck my head inside and said, "If you're real, say something." Nothing. I laughed at myself, but the laugh came out sounding like someone else. I shut the door, turned off the light, and crawled under the blanket, feeling like I'd just signed a contract. That was the night the whispers started using my name. At first it was soft, like a draft under the door. Then clearer. "Come here." The voice had no gender. I bolted upright, heart hammering, flashlight clattering to the floor. I didn't scream because some ancient instinct told me not to. Morning again. No one believed me. Mom said I was reading too many spooky books. She confiscated my flashlight to make you sleep properly. My sister whispered, "He talked to you too?" And that was worse than any scratch on the floor. A week later, she stopped mentioning the man at all. She'd just crawl into my bed after midnight, eyes wide, fingers cold, and we'd lie back to back pretending to sleep. Sometimes we whispered facts to each other. Penguins propose with pebbles was her favorite. Like throwing breadcrumbs into a dark forest. We didn't say why we did it. We just did. In the daytime, the house looked innocent. Sunlight through lace curtains, the smell of cinnamon toast. At night, it became a thesis I couldn't defend. Even now, when people talk about childhood imagination, I think about scratches that matched no toy and whispers that knew my name. That's not imagination. That's a message you're not ready to read. The winter that followed felt heavier than other winters, like the air itself had gained weight. Outside, frost etched the windows in patterns that looked like writing. Inside, the whispers never really left. My sister and I had developed a code by then. 3 knocks on the wall between our rooms meant, "Are you awake?" 2 back meant yes. It made me feel like we were running a secret radio station under enemy occupation. One night, the hallway light burned out. Mom forgot to replace the bulb for a week, and that week felt like a year. Without that yellow stripe of light across the floor, my room was a total void. The closet door stood like a black rectangle you could fall into. In the dark, my own breathing sounded like someone else's. That was the night I saw the tall shape at the doorway, not the crouched shadow by the toy chest or the scraping fingers. This was different, vertical, patient. The door creaked, open, and a head leaned in. just far enough for the hall glow from my sister's room to catch a piece of it. I froze. My mind flashed on a random old age fact. People over 70 lose about a third of their taste buds. Why that fact? Maybe because my mouth had gone dry. I shut my eyes and tried to slow my breathing, like playing dead. The footsteps receded. When I opened my eyes, the door was closed again. The smell of cold wax hung in the air, as if Mom's candle prayers had been lit and snuffed out at once. Morning came with thin sunlight and Mom's denial. "Nobody came in your room," she said, flipping pancakes. My sister ate hers without syrup, staring at nothing. Then she said quietly, "He was by my bed last night." Mom dropped the spatula. It clanged like a cymbal. For a second, she looked older, the way a teacher does when a student asks a question they can't answer. That evening, she pulled a candle from the drawer and lit it in each room, murmuring something under her breath. The house smelled like a church basement. For a couple of nights, the air felt softer, as if someone had turned the volume down. Then the scratches came back, this time on the door frame instead of the floor. I started carrying my school notebook to bed and writing down every sound I heard. Whisper at 2:13 a.m., scratch at 2:21 a.m., soft thump at 2:24 a.m. It looked like lab notes for a class on invisible creatures. An academic debate phrase drifted into my head. Insufficient data for a conclusive argument, and I underlined it twice. To cope, I built rituals. I'd tap the wall 4 times before switching off the light. I'd line up my shoes perfectly parallel. I'd mutter trivia like prayers. Bananas are berries, but strawberries aren't. It gave me a sense of cause and effect. Like if I just did the right sequence, the night would pass without incident. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes I woke with the closet door wide open. Once I found my flashlight standing upright in the middle of the floor, as if placed there. Another time my pillow was damp and smelled faintly of soil. I didn't tell Mom. Her patience had thinned. She'd started blaming our wild imaginations for her headaches. Winter dragged on. My sister drew fewer pictures. She'd sit at the table coloring in silence, her crayon strokes slower, as if shading something only she could see. She stopped knocking on the wall at night. Instead, she'd come to my room before bed, stand at the door and whisper, "Don't look at the closet." I didn't. I lay on my side, blanket pulled over my head, listening to the house tick and groan. Sometimes I'd think about a strange fact our teacher had mentioned. Rats can squeeze through holes the size of a quarter, and imagine something doing that through the cracks of our lives. The worst part wasn't the noises or the shapes. It was the sense of being studied, like we were part of an experiment and someone was writing notes just out of sight. That's why I kept my own notes. I wanted to be the observer, not the observed. But each entry blurred into the next until I couldn't tell which night was which. One morning, exhausted, I left my notebook on the kitchen table. When I came back from school, it was gone. Mom said she hadn't seen it. My sister wouldn't meet my eyes. That night, when the whispers returned, they sounded amused. I knew then we couldn't win with candles or prayers or science facts. The house had its own curriculum, and we were the homework. And still, I tried to study because kids don't quit the way adults do. We believe in secret rules. We believe if we memorize enough trivia or tap the wall in the right rhythm, we'll pass the test. I'm 22 and work the overnight weekend shifts at a 24-hour gas station. I'd been there less than 2 months when something happened that still makes me uneasy. One night around 2:30 a.m., my weekday co-worker Max and his friend Ben stopped in for coffee. They were giggly from mushrooms and went back outside to smoke and play with Max's dog. Ben mentioned a car parked at the far end of the lot with its lights off but engine running. The man inside said he was waiting for a DoorDash order, yet I hadn't had an order in almost 2 hours. I brushed it off and kept cleaning in the back where I couldn't see the parking lot. An hour later, they came in again. Max said the car had stayed there the whole time, the man alternating between staring at them and looking at his phone. When Ben confronted him, the man pretended not to speak English, then claimed he had the wrong address and drove off. Max noticed the car was brand new, had no license plate, and blankets piled in the back, enough to hide someone. As it pulled away, another unplated car with its lights off followed it out. Before leaving, Max told me to be careful. The next night, while I was mopping at 3 a.m., 4 men came in for coffee and snacks. One asked about a running Subaru with no plates parked at the far end of the lot. My stomach dropped. They said 2 guys inside were arguing and pointing toward the store doors. When one of the customers approached the car, it suddenly reversed and drove off. I told them it matched the suspicious car from the night before. Alarmed, they offered to stay with me. They hung around about 20 minutes until I seemed in the clear. Nothing else happened that shift, but I kept glancing outside. What unsettled me most was I never saw the car myself. Other people kept warning me. 2 nights in a row, same description, same hidden spot out of view of the register. If those men hadn't been there, I might have been alone when they decided to act. When I turned 10, my family moved. The old house with the clawed floors and whispering closet receded in the rearview mirror like a bad channel fading out. My mother had remarried by then, and the new house looked like a reset button. Fresh siding, a yard with trees, a street so quiet it seemed rehearsed. I told myself the dark couldn't follow me here. Children always think geography is magic. My new bedroom sat at the very end of a long hallway. 2 big windows opened onto the backyard. A deep closet recessed into the wall like a miniature room. On the first afternoon, I stood inside it, arms spread, thinking of Narnia jokes. The carpet smelled of new paint and someone else's life. My stepdad said, "Plenty of space for your stuff." I nodded, trying to feel normal. The first night I woke around midnight to a soft shuffling inside the closet. It wasn't loud, more like clothes brushing together. I stared at the door, telling myself this was just settling wood. But then the door trembled as if something had pressed on it from the inside. My body went rigid. In school, we just learned that an adult human has roughly 5 liters of blood. I imagined mine turning to ice. I wanted to run to my mom's room but couldn't move. I stayed like that until sleep finally took me. Morning light made the closet door look innocent again. It stood slightly ajar, though I'd shut it tight the night before. My mom said maybe the air vents pushed it open. I knew better. That afternoon, I lined up my shoes as a doorstop. That night, the door still opened a crack. After that, the nights grew worse. I began hearing a faint tapping on my window. At first, I thought it was tree branches, but when I checked, there were no branches anywhere near the glass. The tapping went on for minutes, stopping only when I pulled the blanket over my head. One night, I peeked out and saw a pale hand pressed against the window. It stayed there, unmoving, then slowly slid down until it disappeared. The window was on the 2nd floor, far too high for anyone to reach. I didn't sleep at all that night. When I told my mom, she laughed, thinking I was joking, then tried to convince me I'd been dreaming. My stepdad laughed too, but quietly kept the hallway light on at night. His smile looked like a sticker that wouldn't stick. A random old age fact popped into my head. After 60, Most people sleep lighter and wake more easily. I wondered if that's why adults pretend not to hear things. The pale hand wasn't the only change. The closet began to smell faintly of damp earth. Toys shifted positions. A pair of socks went missing and reappeared folded on my pillow. Academic phrases from science class floated through my head. Anecdotal evidence does not equal empirical proof. But I couldn't think of a way to measure a hand at a second-floor window. About a month later, my 4-year-old brother began speaking about the White Lady. He said she came into his room and sat on his bed. My mother dismissed it as imagination until one night his screams woke me. I ran in and found him curled under his blanket crying. He said the lady had stood by his door staring at him, her eyes black. I believed him instantly because of what I'd seen at my window. I also noticed that after his scream, the house went very still, like a pause between tracks. I started sleeping with the blanket over my head again, but it didn't stop the dreams. I began to dream of her too, her tall figure in the corner whispering my name in a dry, leaf-like voice. Sometimes I'd wake and still hear it faint but real. My brother started drawing her with chalk on the sidewalk, a stick figure with hair down to the ground. He stopped after Mom scolded him for scaring the neighbors. During the day, I played the role of normal kid. Homework, cartoons, bike rides on the cul-de-sac. But at night, my room felt like a laboratory, and I was the test subject. I tried small experiments, hanging a string on the closet door to see if it moved, sprinkling baby powder on the windowsill to check for prints. The string swayed at 3 a.m. The powder stayed pristine, but the tapping returned anyway. One quirky, off-topic fact I clung to was that certain species of lizards can regrow their tails. I told myself I could regrow courage in the same way, piece by piece. It helped for a while. But courage without evidence is just a story you tell yourself. I stopped telling Mom about the noises. She was busy with my stepdad, their new routines, bills, her own insomnia. When she did ask, I'd say fine, and she'd smile with relief. Kids learn fast. Adults want reassurance more than truth. Then one night, I woke from a dream of falling and heard the closet door click. The sound was tiny but distinct, like a key turning. I lay still, blanket over my head, counting my breaths. Outside the window, the backyard was black, no moon. The air smelled faintly of damp earth again. In the silence, my own heart sounded like footsteps. My brother's story about the White Lady should have been the turning point. Instead, it became our family's new bedtime story, unspoken but ever present. He was only 4, small enough that his feet didn't reach the end of the mattress. Yet he would whisper about her like an adult recounting a nightmare he couldn't quite shake. He said she sat on his bed and hummed. He said her hair moved even when the air was still. He said she liked storms. I'd sit with him after school in the living room, trying to build Lego towers tall enough to distract us. We never talked about her directly. We'd just share facts instead. "Did you know butterflies taste with their feet?" he'd offer. "Did you know some turtles breathe through their butts?" I'd reply. We were like 2 kids building a trivia wall against the dark. Academic articles call it displacement coping. You replace fear with random knowledge. It worked until night fell. He began waking up screaming. The first time, I ran in and found him curled under his blanket, crying. Mom arrived seconds later, hair wild, face pale. She scolded him for scaring everyone, but her hands shook as she tucked him in. Our stepdad stood in the doorway, silent, like a guard who didn't know what he was guarding. The next day at breakfast, my brother drew a picture of her on the back of a placemat. Tall stick body, long black hair, no eyes at all, Mom turned it over without looking. "No scary drawings at the table," she said, stirring her coffee. The spoon clinked like a countdown. I started seeing her too, not clearly, but in the edges of dreams. I'd wake with her whispers still in my ears, dry and brittle, like leaves rubbed together. Sometimes she used my name. Sometimes she laughed softly, which was worse. My closet door would stand wide open as if it had been listening too. One off-topic fact became my nightly talisman. The average person walks about 100,000 miles in a lifetime. I'd whisper it to myself before turning off the light. I told my brother to pick a fact too. He chose, "Whales sleep with half their brain awake." We clung to those facts like flotation devices. But the nights kept escalating. The tapping on my window grew louder, now joined by faint scratching on the glass. My brother claimed he saw her face pressed against his window one night. I believed him, but didn't say so. We both started sleeping with our heads at the foot of the bed again. Our stepdad began leaving the hallway light on. He never admitted fear, but his smile became tighter. He'd crack jokes at dinner, ghosts don't like meatloaf, but ate in silence. Mom developed headaches and kept aspirin in her pocket. I tried experiments again. I sprinkled salt at the closet door. I hung a mirror inside. I even recited math formulas before bed. Nothing worked. One night the mirror fell and cracked without a sound. Another night the salt pattern had shifted into a crude spiral by morning. Academic debate phrases filled my head. Lack of control variables, observer bias. But the data only got stranger. Brother stopped talking about her altogether. He'd crawl into my bed after midnight, silent, eyes wide. We'd lie back to back, our trivia wall crumbling. Sometimes I'd hear him mutter in his sleep, "She's here." Once I woke to find him sitting upright, staring at the closet, his lips moving as if in conversation. During the day, I'd ride my bike in circles around the cul-de-sac, memorizing every crack in the pavement the way I had on our old street. It didn't help. I'd still glance at our windows, expecting to see a pale face looking out. One quirky discovery from the library stuck with me. Crows can remember human faces for years. I wondered if she could too. I started recording sounds with a little cassette player my dad had given me. Mostly I got static, the hum of the house, the occasional creak. But once, at 3 a.m., a whisper emerged on playback. A faint, dry voice saying my name. I erased it and shoved the player under my bed. By then, my dreams had synchronized with my brother's. We both dreamed of a tall figure at the foot of the bed, hair swaying, eyes empty. Sometimes, she stood in the corner. Sometimes she leaned over us, breath cold on our faces. We never told Mom the full details. She was tired, and adults want sleep more than truth. The house became a stage with 3 actors, me, my brother, and whatever wore white. Mom and our stepdad were the offstage voices, pretending the play wasn't happening. Old age wisdom says, what you ignore can't hurt you. That's comforting, but wrong. Ignoring just makes it quieter. Even now, I can smell the damp earth of that closet when a storm rolls in. It's like the scent gets stored in memory, ready to replay. And every time I hear trivia about whales or butterflies, I'm back in that room, whispering facts in the dark with my brother, trying to keep the walls from breathing. The storm that marked the turning point arrived on a Thursday. Heavy rain rattled the windows like a handful of coins. Wind pressed against the siding, making the house flex and groan. In the glow of my nightlight, the shadows pulsed like a heartbeat. My brother had fallen asleep on my floor again, his small hand clutching one of my socks. We both pretended not to notice. Around 2 in the morning, I woke to a faint metallic click. My eyes went straight to the window. The lock turned by itself, slow as a clock hand. The window slid open with a hiss, even though rain battered the glass. Cold air poured in. It smelled like wet soil and something faintly metallic, like old coins or blood. That smell still makes me tense even now. She came through the opening without climbing, just drifting like fabric pulled by an invisible string. Her long white dress shifted, although the air was still. Her hair hung black and stringy, dripping rain that never hit the carpet. She was impossibly tall, her head almost touching the ceiling. The same figure from our dreams, now moving in real space. I couldn't scream at first. My body went to stone. A random off-topic fact tried to anchor me. Giraffes have the same number of neck vertebrae as humans. It made no sense, but it kept me from fainting. Her face tilted down. Chalk pale skin, empty black eyes, mouth slightly open. Her breath touched my face, cold and dry, like opening a freezer full of leaves. She whispered my name. This time it was clear. Dry and brittle, but unmistakable. My brother stirred, eyes fluttering. His lips formed, "She's here," without sound. That broke my paralysis. I screamed, full-throated. It startled even me. He screamed too. For a second, her expression changed, like a blink of irritation. Then she was gone. The window was closed and locked. The carpet was dry. Our stepdad burst in, Mom behind him, both yelling questions. I could see fear behind their anger. They left the hallway light on all night after that. They started keeping the bedroom door ajar. Mom put a Bible under my pillow without telling me. I found it and left it there anyway. For a few nights, nothing happened. We thought maybe the scream had worked like an alarm, but the house had only shifted gears. The tapping returned, now paired with a low hum that seemed to come from inside the walls. My brother began sleepwalking, padding down the hall and stopping at the window like a moth. We had to lock our own doors to keep him inside. I stopped using my cassette recorder. I didn't want more evidence. At school, I drifted through classes, head full of static. Teachers marked me distracted. I'd scribble equations in the margins of my notebook. Force equals mass times acceleration, sin 2 sao plus cos 2 sao mahawesver 1. Anything to feel a pattern. Academic debate phrases echoed, subjective perception cannot be verified. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But extraordinary evidence was clawing at my window at night. One night I tried to confront her. I sat up in bed before the tapping began, whispering random facts like passwords. Octopuses have 3 hearts. Bananas are berries. Sharks existed before trees. The tapping started anyway. The closet door creaked. I whispered, "I know you're there." Silence. Then the dry voice said my name from the dark. I couldn't see her, but the temperature dropped. My brother whimpered in his sleep. I lost my nerve and pulled the blanket over my head, shaking until dawn. After that, I begged Mom to let me sleep in her room. She said I needed to be brave, but her voice cracked. Stepdad installed a nightlight shaped like a moon. He didn't say why. Adults like to pretend their actions are neutral. The weeks blurred. Some nights, nothing happened. Some nights, the window lock clicked once and stopped, like a reminder. My brother stopped drawing. He developed a cough that went away after we moved again. Mom developed dark circles under her eyes. Stepdad kept aspirin by the bed. I kept a new ritual. 3 deep breaths, 1 fact, then eyes shut. My last fact before sleep was always the same. Even the longest night ends at dawn. It wasn't a real trivia fact, just something I'd read on a greeting card, but it worked better than the others. That storm night with the window lock was the climax. Everything after felt like echoes. The white lady never fully vanished, but she stopped crossing the boundary. Maybe the scream, maybe the prayers, maybe she got bored. I don't know. I only know we stayed 3 more years and survived mostly intact. But storms still make me hesitate before stepping out of bed. I still scan the corners for something tall and pale. That habit never left. Years later, when I was older and out of that house, the memories became like stones I carried in my pocket. Small, solid, and impossible to forget. My family had moved on. My brother rarely mentioned the white lady anymore. Mom and my stepdad divorced quietly. On the surface, we looked like any other family with old stories and new problems. But storms still turned us all quiet at the dinner table, and no one ever said why. I started biking again in a different town, trying to reclaim that feeling of freedom I'd had before everything got strange. Every afternoon after school, I pedaled up and down the cracked sidewalks of our new neighborhood, memorizing every tree, every mailbox, every pothole. It was my ritual of normalcy. One house on the corner drew my attention, though. Long driveway, wide lawn, and an older man who stood at the edge most afternoons. He wore a hat and never stepped off his property. When I rode by, he smiled and called out a greeting. Sometimes he asked about school or my bike. Sometimes he told me small jokes. Our exchanges were always short, but they felt friendly and safe. He seemed to know little things about me I hadn't told him, like that I had a younger brother or that my dad had just gotten a new car. I assumed he'd noticed from a distance the way neighbors do. My mother had strict rules about not crossing the street alone, so I never went closer. The man never asked me to. Once, when I showed off my new red bike with its shiny bell, he called out, "Nice bike," and joked about racing me to the corner. I laughed and said my mom would be angry. He smiled and said, "One day." Then, without warning, he stopped appearing. For several days, the driveway stood empty and the curtains in the front window were drawn. I felt uneasy not seeing him there. One afternoon, riding slowly past, I glimpsed a woman in the backyard. I had never seen anyone there before. She had her hair tied back and carried a watering can. I hesitated on the sidewalk, too shy to call out. Over the next few days, I saw her again on the porch with a mug, but still no man. Finally, curiosity outweighed caution. One afternoon, I waited until no one was watching, then pedaled across the street, even though I knew I wasn't supposed to. Up close, the house seemed larger, the driveway longer. I stopped at the back gate, and the woman noticed me. She came over, wiping her hands on her dress, and asked what I was doing. I told her about the man who used to stand in the driveway, the man in the hat who said hello every afternoon. I expected her to smile and say he was inside or on a trip. Instead, her face changed. She said the man I described sounded like her husband, but he had died the year before. I asked if she had a picture. She went inside and returned with a small framed photograph. It showed a man with the same hat and the same broad smile. But in the photo, he had a thin, pale scar running from his ear to his mouth. The man I had seen had no scar. The woman said the scar had been there since he was young. She repeated that her husband had died and that no one else lived in the house. She herself had only moved back to tend the garden. She had never seen anyone standing in the driveway. A cold, hollow feeling opened in my chest. I thanked her and backed down the driveway, then pedaled home in silence. That night, I lay awake thinking about the man's laugh and the way he said my name. Days later, during a light rain, I woke to hear someone calling my name outside my window in that same familiar voice. My mother came in and told me it was the wind. My father, back then still visiting, checked the locks and shone a flashlight outside. They found no one. My friends at school laughed when I told them. One dared me to stand in the driveway at night and call his name. I didn't take the dare. As I grew older, the street changed, houses sold, new people moved into that home. I left for college, then work, then other cities. But the memory of the man in the hat stayed with me like a stone I couldn't shake. Even as an adult, I sometimes drove down that street and saw children riding bikes near the corner. The driveway was empty now. I've thought about stopping to ask if anyone else has ever heard a voice in the rain, but I never do. Some questions stay unanswered. Old age wisdom says time heals everything. It doesn't. It just rearranges the scars into quieter patterns. Quirky fact. The grooves on vinyl records are so small that a single LP can hold several miles of sound. That's how memory feels. Miles of grooves on a disc you can't stop playing. And the academic part of me still debates. Were these shared hallucinations, night terrors, suggestibility? Or did something real pass through our lives, leaving only scratches and stories? On storm nights, I still hesitate to get out of bed. I still scan corners for something tall and pale. I tell myself I'm being silly, and sometimes I even laugh. But I also close the closet door tight and keep the window locked, because rituals are a kind of inheritance too. They're what's left when you've survived the test but never got the answer key. This entire story has been a single continuous first-person thread, a kind of whispered late-night confession framed like a YouTube bedtime story. It began with plastic stars on the ceiling of an old house and a toy chest whose lid would not stay shut. It moved through fingernail scratches on floorboards, candle prayers, and a tall shape at the doorway. It followed me into a bigger house with a deep closet, tapping at a second-floor window, and my younger brother's tales of a white lady whose visits aligned with my own sightings and dreams. Trivia and quirky facts became our makeshift shields. Academic phrases, our clumsy arguments against the unexplainable. Storm night became the climax. The window lock turning by itself, the white lady floating in, her breath on my face, my scream echoing down the hall. After that, her presence dulled but never vanished. We lived with a residue. Rearranged toys, silent drawings, adults who left nightlights on but said nothing. Years later, on another street, a man in a hat greeted me daily and then disappeared, revealed to be someone who had died long before. His voice returned on a rainy night outside my window. Across 7 sections, the narrative blended original fragments with invented scenes, quirks, and sensory details. It kept the voice of a late-night host, half sarcastic, half whispered, threading in old-age wisdom, off-topic facts and small jokes while building tension without gore. It ended not with resolution, but with a lingering habit, scanning corners in storms, closing closets tight, and knowing some questions stay unanswered. That is the quiet inheritance of living with the unexplained.